Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to the influential leaders and trailblazers from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigating the fifth industrial revolution.
Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to influential leaders from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigate the fifth industrial revolution. I'm Christian Renaud. I'm the global head of the technology practice for Markets and Markets, and I'm joined today by Dalia Tarabay, the executive vice president of corporate strategy at IBM. Dalia is a global tech strategy and operations leader, and she currently serves as the executive vice president of corporate strategy at IBM with a mission to shape and accelerate IBM's hybrid cloud and AI strategy. With over 18 years of leadership experience across big tech at IBM and Google and management consulting at Booz & Company, she brings a unique blend of strategic acumen and operational excellence expertise to the table. Dalia is a graduate of Harvard Business School and is passionate about harnessing the power of technology to solve complex challenges and create meaningful impact. She's committed to empowering teams and organizations to thrive in a rapidly evolving digital landscape. So welcome to Disruption Dialogues, Dalia.
Thank you for having me, Christian. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So today, Dalia and I are going to discuss strategies for enterprises to harness generative AI effectively, including innovation models, optimizing AI tools, leveraging enterprise data, deployment strategies. And everybody knows Gen AI is a very popular topic, but I would characterize the noise in the industry around the topic as just that, pretty much noise. There's been very little sort of meaty discussion on the realities of deploying these technologies in a smart and rational way, and more of a let's throw AI against the wall and let's see what sticks. This is what we're going to correct today during our podcast. So to kick things off and just sort of frame the conversation, Dalia, if I may, maybe we can discuss the advantages and drawbacks of planning and deploying Gen AI using maybe internal expertise, internal resources, or conversely leveraging the broader community. The shorthand in the industry that I've used in the past for this, and I think you do as well, are the concepts of open innovation and closed innovation. Maybe you can define for our listeners and viewers these concepts and explain how they relate to Gen AI in the enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Open innovation involves collaborating with external sources, so academia, startups, open source communities, contributors to code, to drive innovation. And it's about leveraging ideas and technologies from beyond your organization, so from without. Closed innovation, on the other hand, is when a company is focused exclusively on internal development, so they're creating their own proprietary systems and solutions. In the context of Gen AI, open innovation might mean using open source models like IBM's Granite models, while closed innovation would involve developing custom AI models in-house.
Understood. So in the context of generative AI, what are sort of some of the benefits and drawbacks of each approach? I know there's concerns about intellectual property and ownership of the data, trade secrets, things like that. Time to development. What do you believe sort of the benefits and drawbacks?
That's correct, Christian. I think open source fosters a more, I would say, rapid pace of innovation because it uses, and the community is using and collaborating to the latest models out there with transparency by virtue of it being a community. And I believe that in and of itself minimizes data security, copyright issues, or limits them at least. It also increases cost effectiveness because you're optimizing to the cost for performant models as you go, as you innovate rapidly. And it provides more flexibility through customization of these models. It also avoids lock-ins, right? If you're an organization into a certain model, I think also the technology is just early on. So there is an ethical kind of safety in the community rallying and contributing to a space as we figure this technology out more and more. So, I mean, cat is out of the bag. I am a fan of open source, as you can tell. But closed innovation, you're right. It might give an organization a greater sense of control, especially this early on as you're figuring out a technology. I can see an argument, as you mentioned, for enterprises where intellectual property is a major concern. I can see that argument. However, I do believe the trade-offs far outweigh the benefits if you go the open source, the closed source route. It is a lot more resource intensive. So if you can afford that as a gigantic company, then that's great. But it is very resource intensive. I do believe it makes execution slower because, again, we're early on in the curve of this innovation still, whereby you need the rallying of the minds, and that drives faster execution from a community-based perspective. And I do think, again, back to the ethical piece, which is important to me, I do think it makes you dependent as an organization on the ethical governance of that specific company. Versus the community that by nature brings its own checks and balances.
Understood. Well, you might have tipped your hand with your answer, and you might have a bit of a bias there, but do you think there's one of those two approaches is better for enterprises of adopting generative AI?
Right, exactly. I do think the good news, though, Christian, is that open source seems to be the new norm. I believe 2/3 the statistics of models released are open source. Around the statistics out there, around 85% of enterprises use open source models to varying degrees. And there's also an increase in open source software usage amongst a large majority of organizations. I think there's been like over 20,000 paper contributions to PyTorch, et cetera. So wow. it is definitely the norm, I would say.
So let's move to model optimization. I know enterprises often default to LLMs, large language models like GPT. Is that always the best approach? Is that always the best fit for deploying Gen AI in the enterprise?
That's a great question, Christian. I don't think that's the case at all. I think while LLMs are quite versatile, they might not always be the best solution. For example, if an enterprise needs a chatbot for IT support, or a smaller, very domain-specific model might perform better than a large language model and be more cost efficient, and at the same time require less computational power, so less energy intensive. I do believe that right now, a large majority of companies find fit-for-purpose models more cost-efficient, with less, as I mentioned, computational, but also storage requirements. Smaller models, I think, trained on curated data sets can give increased accuracy as well, and are easier and more efficient to develop, fine-tune, scale. So recognizing this need, I do think we're all seeing major model families have released and continue to release smaller models, like IBM's Granite, OpenAI's GPT, the smaller ones, ones especially most recently, and Meta's Llama, and so on. So I do believe that companies are recognizing fit for purpose, and the importance of it.
So fit for purpose, sort of horses for courses. When enterprises are trying to figure out what model selection, what model optimization, what are the factors you believe they should consider when selecting and optimizing models?
Frankly, I think there are a few factors, but I think the number one factors that I know when speaking to clients, or that we care about even at IBM and previous tech companies that I worked at, is trust. And that's expected, especially early on in this massive, leap of innovation that is Gen AI. I think the stat is about that almost like over 95% of executives don't have that much trust in current Gen AI capabilities. That's a staggering number. Like, that is
terrifying. Yeah.
It is alarming. It is quite alarming. And AI transparency, so the questions that I would ask, back to your question, is AI transparent? Is explainability of the AI enabled? Are there, clear and evident security and data certifications? Is there compliance with regulations? So I think all of these sub-factors enable the mega factor of trust and help it. I think, there's still strides to be made, in that direction. I think the number two factor for consideration is how complex is your task? Does the task require deep contextual understanding or just basic responses? So that that needs to factor in what you choose. Latency requirements, like are the applications more real time? A great example would be fraud detection, which is top of mind for me. That needs sub-millisecond or sub-second latency requirements to catch it. And that tends to also favor like smaller models and on-premise models, for example. And I would say the last factor, back to your main question, is data availability. Do you have enough high quality data, to fine tune a model? So I think these are the main factors: trust, task complexity, latency requirements, and data availability that should factor into your decision making.
That's very helpful. I think that will help enterprises shortlist different approaches and different selection. Are there, pivoting for a second to optimization, are there trends in optimization that you're seeing that you're excited about?
Yes. Let me see. I think for me, one major trend is fine tuning. I think the process of, I'll define it. So it's the process of taking a pre-trained LLM and then further training it on a specific data set to adapt it for a specific business purpose or a task. So it's more, and I do think you don't have to go and, retrain the large LLM, but it's about fine tuning it for a specific data set or task or domain. I do think it's obviously more cost effective than training from scratch, and AI practitioners have faced limits to the ways you can modify an LLM. So fine-tuning an LLM, like to understand a specific area of knowledge or skills, typically involves forking on an existing open model, and then running very expensive and resource-intensive training. Other limits that AI practitioners have faced is that there's no way to incorporate improvements back to the upstream project. And that's no way for the LLMs to continuously improve, from community contributions based on those learnings. Right. And so, or those improvements. And I think lastly, the limitation that's been faced is that LLM refinements have typically required large amounts of human-generated data, which can be, again, time-consuming and very expensive to get. So I'm really excited to see solutions like, IBM has Instruct Lab, IBM Red Hat have Instruct Lab, and they punch through each of those limitations. So I do think fine-tuning is a great trend in favor, of accelerating the innovation in this space and the application of it where it matters.
Understood. Yeah, I want to circle back to something that you touched on, or we touched against earlier in the podcast. When we were talking about fit for purpose, we were talking about different data sets and different models, and we talked about publicly available data and obviously the explosion of the size of those data sets. But I want to contrast that with enterprise data and sort of the relevance of enterprise data. I know IBM does a lot of work with enterprise data. What do you think makes that so much more valuable compared to publicly available data sources?
That's a great question, Christian. I think the space is running out of data, public data. We don't have enough of it. Some Altman says that, it's quite, again, alarming and frightening given the expectations and the high expectations we've set for this space. So, and I do think the unlock is in enterprise data. Because enterprise data is, and again, it's proprietary, just to make sure we're defining it for the audience, highly specific and tailored to a company's unique operations and customers. So this is data within your walls, right? And it adds a layer of relevance also to the LLMs that public data often lacks, right? When it comes to the enterprise. And so, for example, like sales trends or customer feedback or operational data provide insights that public data sets just cannot provide. They cannot replicate. And so I think that the majority of IT leaders do believe that leveraging their own business data sets will give them a significant advantage. I believe that as well, over competition. That you're not going to find that competitive advantage with public data.
Right.
That's just becomes table stakes. However, to me, like that unlock has not happened yet, because currently all available public data is now already represented in foundation models. Meanwhile, less than 1% of all enterprise data is represented in foundation models.
Wow.
Less than 1%. That's how little, of an unlock there has
Lots
been.
of white space to work with. Yeah.
Right. And by the way, 52% of enterprise data is still in data centers.
Yeah.
It's not in the cloud. And so I think that's the major unlock that I feel like even at IBM, we're helping our clients with that through our data platforms. And again, like that enhancement of the relevance and precision in favor of creating a competitive advantage is important. And you can train, your model with your customer specific data and get very personalized recommendations and solutions that resonate with your customers. And so this level of customization does drive real value, but you need to unlock your enterprise data for AI for your models.
So, and you made a couple of very, very valid points there on all of the publicly available data being available. And I know that there's challenges with conflicting regulatory environments about, copyright protection and personal identifiable information, things like that, as well as data hygiene. So I imagine there's probably some performance benefits to enterprise data in generative AI models. Have you seen that in your work?
Yes, I think, I think for me, you've touched on key challenges like data silos, quality issues, compliance, like we see with GDPR and HIPAA compliance, which require enterprises to handle like data very, very carefully. I do think investing in enterprise-grade tooling, providing integrated capabilities, especially AI, grade A AI tooling, like application templates, data integration and governance, ones that offer productivity solutions that work and connect across different IT environments. I do think that is the path to success and to fighting back against these challenges and resolving them. I do think adopting privacy preserving techniques like different privacy, differential privacy ensures compliance without compromising the value of the data. I think that's very important as well.
So you touched on
my turn to get tongue-tied there with differential privacy.
So you touched on it, but can you kind of summarize what are those challenges with the enterprise data? You mentioned silos. What are some of the other challenges?
Data silos, so different teams or departments often store data in disconnected systems. Quality issues, incomplete or inconsistent data can really degrade model performance. And yeah, I touched on a couple of regulations and there's more coming. We all know how active the legal space is on that front. So so I do think, but I do think these are critical, like making sure that you're compliant and handling the data carefully is critical.
You mentioned just a moment ago enterprise grade tooling, but what can enterprises do to overcome the challenges you just articulated?
I think there are a few, getting on the right integrated platforms across IT environments is very important. I think that's when, in terms of tooling, again, getting the right templates in place, the data integration platforms, watsonx.data is a great example. watsonx.governance is a great example. I think these are platforms that enable that integration and those capabilities with across environments that give you that transparency and control over the data and the cleanup required.
Got it. Finally, I have one last set of questions for you, and we maybe talked about the who, what, when. Let's talk about the where maybe a little bit. Deployment models, deployment venues, and you had that great statistic earlier about the amount of enterprise data that's still in data centers on-prem. Obviously, there's data in the cloud. Most organizations now have some sort of hybrid model. When it comes to deploying AI, what are the factors, or how do enterprises decide where to deploy Gen AI? Or is it a yes, all of them?
Yeah, that's my favorite topic, actually. I do think, maybe let's take a step back to the history of it.
Okay.
And where we've come from and sort of where we are and where we're going. You kind of touched on where we are. But I do think, we all know tech modernization is a top priority for organizations. Globally, there's about $4 trillion by 2027 will be spent on digital transformation. That's massive. Those are staggering dollar spends. And I think we see that the first generation of cloud-driven transformation, which is a major push, is falling short and has fallen short of the usually targeted and expected ROIs out of it. So usually, back then we were all thinking, 150% plus is a target, ROI for this transformation. Well, It turns out, Christian, it's closer to 5 to 10%, give or take. And there are several concrete, real reasons for that. Tech debt, cloud management, et cetera. I see, and executive recognize the need, for radical change in their cloud architecture and operations. I do think, to your point, the hybrid multi-cloud is where the dust is settling. It's the norm. It's becoming the norm nowadays. I think that's crucial because enterprises ultimately should be able to deploy workloads across all locations where their business runs. The workloads need to be where they're needed and where they're run. So whether it's SaaS, it's across different clouds, public clouds, private clouds, on premises, at the edge, distributed clouds. So I do think that's, the workloads need to meet where the business runs. I do think that enables flexibility in deployments, and you get to tailor technology choices to specific use cases like GPUs, CPUs, cloud, mainframe, everything, that you need. And that boosts the performance and cost efficiency. There is a multiplier effect across these environments. And I think there was IBM's Institute for Business Value published a thought leadership piece where there was a statistic where 80% of organizations believe that IT hybrid environments are optimal to flexibly managing, applications and data. And so I do think, however, I want to be very transparent in that you can also make it all worse if you go from, without intentionality, from that push to cloud to just casually, scratching the surface of what a hybrid multi-cloud environment needs. There needs to be a lot of intentionality in the architecture and the design of hybrid multi-cloud. And it needs to be done correctly. It is important to remove data and operational silos, which we touched upon before, and to have cross-cutting visibility and control, right, over your environments. So I think this intentionality in hybrid architecture, hybrid by design, is critical. And obviously, I work at IBM, and it's a mission for us to help, our enterprises and our customers be very intentional about that design and that architecture. And it's a journey that we're dedicated to being with them on. But I think it's a lot more logical and practical for the enterprises than a push for a certain deployment location all the way through.
Yeah. Sort of horses for courses, again, fit for purpose. And we ran into this with cloud, where cloud was the answer, what's the question? And we did a lot of lift and shift and a lot of tech debt, as you said, of legacy applications to the cloud, and then expected them to magically refactor themselves or something. And I think now that we are at the generation where we're back to sort of cloud native, I think we're seeing the same thing. AI is the answer. What's the question? Okay, well, let's now architect and let's design our topology around the best execution venue for specific workloads. Is that at the edge? Is that in the cloud? Is it at the data center? Or is it, depending on the application? I imagine that pretty strongly affects, for the CFOs that are listening or watching, return on investment, ROI curves. Have you seen, I know we're still in the early stages, have you seen any demonstrable benefit or impact to ROI as far as the deployment choice?
Absolutely. Christian, I think we're already seeing, hybrid by design delivering 3 times higher ROI, and more importantly, enables AI at scale to enterprises, and that's across industries, finance, healthcare, etc. There's also that AI enabling element is important because AI models operate across hybrid architecture. So data for AI, model training, inferencing are distributed across hybrid environments, and hybrid brings AI to wherever the business needs are and where the data is, because containers provide a scalable and automated infrastructure for deploying AI workloads from the cloud all the way to the edge. So I think that's the simple fact of it. And yes, to your question, we are seeing that multiplier effect on ROI.
That's fantastic. So I know we've covered a lot of ground. I know your time is very valuable. I know our listeners and viewers' time is valuable. We talked about open and closed innovation. We talked about model selection optimization, benefits and drawbacks of public and enterprise data, and just most recently, deployment models, execution venues. So thank you for covering so much ground in a very short period of time. I think this really helped move the conversation in the industry from the throw it against the wall and see what sticks to something far more realistic. And now that we have actual learnings from actual deployments that you've shared with us today, any closing thoughts or key takeaways for our viewers or listeners today before we wrap?
Yeah, I think my key takeaway is, Gen AI is a powerful tool. We're seeing transformative. I'm very excited that, I'm getting to live through this transformation, a new frontier of innovation, and work at the front of it. And so I think, but success depends on strategy. I think choosing the right innovation model, optimizing your tools for purpose, leveraging your enterprise data, and being very intentional with your hybrid architecture and hybrid multi-cloud deployment is critical. That's what I would leave your listeners with.
Great.
It's been fun, and thank you for the thoughtful questions, Christian. I really enjoyed this.
All your time and insights. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in today. And be sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of Disruption Dialogue Season 2, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all and have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to know how you can navigate and thrive in this disruptive era, subscribe to Disruption Dialogues on your go-to podcast channels and stay tuned for more interesting episodes.